You get a conditional counterplan, but you only get one. That's reciprocal to your affirmative advocacy. The status quo will spot you that you always get the status quo. That's a logical option for the negative to say this current system is fine. You get one thing to you get one alternative to test our advocacy overall. Does that solve any of these arguments? No, we said no. Nixon doesn't like your answer. Why not?
Because then it takes away critical thinking and allowing you to run like other stuff, like there could be other cases where like actually with Heidegger or something like that.
But we said that these arguments apply to even just one conditional counterplan. It increases critical thinking. You get either the square or the counterplan, right?
But that limits the neg.
It limits the neg. So one area of offense doesn't argue. It doesn't answer is that there should be a proliferation of these things because more critical thinking is better. Is what you're saying. What? Okay, deal with it for neg. Yeah. Pepsi. You had your hand up. I thought.
Oh, yeah, I was basically gonna say what he said about like it sort of takes away like the like multiple worlds, like we have to learn about how to debate like in the world of K and the counterplan and the status quo.
So it restricts us, kind of the argument over here, is that we should be able to test the policy and the critical assumptions of the app. Fair enough. So what happens in the negatives when the app's interpretation is you get 3 condo counterplans. What might the 3 be?
K, counterplan.
Another counterplan.
Some people say you can test the methodology of the app, the
agent and the mechanism.
right, the agent and the mechanism. So it's method.
Not A-spec. There's like different types of counterplans, right? Some counterplans test the agent, the state's counterplan, it does the same thing, but it tests it with better method. Then some test the mechanism, or be like some other type of investment or some other thing to do that tests the mechanism of the app, and then you can read K as well. That would be 3 different worlds, plus a score.
So how does that interpretation start to interact with this? Does it solve best policy option? If the app is like, cool, you get 3 of them. No more than 3. Yeah, probably, because you still get to advocate a series of policies. Not every policy option, right? There's a limited amount of time for that. Does it solve your neg flex arguments?
Yeah.
Probably. Does it solve your reciprocity stuff? Well, it doesn't really matter. The ask in that debate. Does it solve your critical thinking? Does it make any sense?
Yeah.
Really? To me, it makes no sense because if I win the conditionality and the status is good, then 100 conditional counterplans are good.
Yeah.
There is no like.
Also, why, with your app, would you ever want to say they could read 3 conditions?
Yes, totally agree.
I
Yeah.
limit them from running from like 6 and 9. Me and I
Yeah.
went to state and they ran like 9 different counterplans.
Okay. I guess that's a reason. That answers your question. A reason why you might want to restrict them to 3.
If they read 9.
Yeah, if they read 9, you might say 3 is better than 9. Although I have a hard time in my head understanding why that's really true.
What is the difference between 3 and 9?
6. Touche, sir. But in terms of our debate about why conditionality is good or bad,
Functionally, why are 3 conditional worlds way less abusive than 9 conditional worlds?
Because it doesn't
They
make
are
any arguments better thinking, because they argue the critical thinking, and that's why they should have 9 counterplans. We argue 3, and we still claim the critical thinking, because we can still have critical debate thinking with 3 different arguments.
But why is 9 way worse than 3 then?
Because it's like, it kills critical thinking, because all you're doing is just putting one skewed argument on each one to address it within a certain amount of time.
yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. It requires that you win in this argument, right? It requires that there's an assumption there about whether depth is better than breadth for critical thinking. That's a debate that certainly we can have. You guys are doing pretty well here. All right, you got something, Pepsi?
Oh no, it was pretty much exactly what it was.
So do you want to talk about rebound or at least the terms?
Yeah.
Might as well. There's another one you'll hear pretty commonly from the app. I guess 2 condo worlds, 2/3. How much time do
The app might also say dispositionality is an interpretation.
Oh, right. We'll get to that one in a second. We haven't talked about this.
We'll talk about dispo separately as a status, because it's another way you can run counterplans, but it's something in opposition to conditionality that the app could say, well, you get to read dispositional counterplans, not conditional.
Or you can say this.
You, yes, can say,
It's
it's
yeah. You could also say it's unconditional. Has to be unconditional. These two things are kind of related. So pre-round conditionality. Anybody familiar with this argument?
Can anyone deduce what it means from the name pre-round conditionality?
When does it happen?
Something excellent.
No.
I'm not.
Does it need somewhat of disclosure?
Really.
Before that. What if I said that the process of of discovering the best policy option, of working out your negative flex, and of dealing with multiple worlds could all be done before we ever got to the tournament? It's the process of you going to the library and doing the research and deciding, based on the literature, which one of these multiple options that you could advance in the debate overall was the best one to achieve victory in the debate.
You have a bunch of strategies against some apps, like when you start brainstorming what to do against affirmatives, you'll come up with a bunch of different counterplans, probably. And then you debate yourself, I guess, which one to choose, which one you think is your best one, right? And then you don't get conditionally kicked the rest of them to not do that research.
Or you can save that for another debate.
Yeah.
But that process, if you can win that process you're talking about, where like you as a debater, or you as a team, or you as your partner, decide which policy option to advance in a particular debate against an affirmative, it could potentially solve a lot of these things. Do we have to still think in multiple worlds? Of course you do, but you have to think about which one of the multiple counterplans is the best way to approach the affirmative. Does it still increase critical thinking? Of course it does, the same reason that I just said. Does it satisfy the search for the best policy option? Well, obviously, that's what we're deciding, is which is the best policy option to advance versus a particular affirmative. So the app sometimes will say, conditionality is okay, but it should be pre-round, which means that you get to advance a counterplan in the debate, and most interpretations of pre-round conditionality that I'm familiar with will allow you to reverse the SQO. The app will say you get the SQO or a conditional counterplan. And this isn't really, I guess, it's an interpretation, but it's just a way of saying that you solve all the reasons that they say condo is good.
I think pre-round conditionality goes hand in hand with one conditional world or dispositionality. It's a reason why you can say, while doing research, we get all of the benefits of conditionality, but in a debate, we have like these fairness strategy arguments that are offensive now because our interp solves your offense.
So
Yeah.
it says that you, before a run, you have these multiple arguments that you can take, but when you go into a run, you should only run the best one you think should be read.
Yep. And that way we test as intellectuals that idea versus the idea of the app of the SQO. And the SQO is always a logical option for negative in any debate because the 1AC is constructed to be better than what? Right. So of course, there is no ground lost if I get to revert to the status quo because the 1AC already answered the status quo. The 2AC now has to construct arguments only against one new world, which is the conditional counterclaim. If the 2AC is still establishing a prima facie case against the SQO, well then, go back to the drawing board, you know? You've got other problems. It's that. Yeah, you got other problems overall. Sometimes apps will say things like it should be unconditional. That's probably pretty groovy for the app, because in that world, they can't revert to the status quo. But there's no part of my inner being that says that's okay or makes any sense to me. So negative would just be a tough spot. If it turns out the counterplan was a bad idea for any reason, it's just like, boom, it's over. Arguments like best policy option and negative flex make a lot of sense versus an unconditional world. Yeah, what's up?
When you have the option to revert to the status quo, it also still allows you to use your advantages, right? It doesn't limit you from getting DAs and stuff like that?
No, it just changes the question. We should talk about this real quick then. That's a great question.
You still have your net benefits and disadvantages. The counterclaim goes away, which changes the nature of both presumption and the world in which the app has to respond.
What the app has to weigh something. Right. So the counterclaim goes away. Even if the net benefit states, okay? States counterplan is conditional as a federalism net benefit, right? Federalism probably links to the app either way, right? Maybe the link is better in a world, right, where the counterplan solves all of the link, but it still links to the app. Politics might be a better example, you know? Politics is a net benefit to the state's counterplan, but if state's counterplan goes away, it does not change the question of whether or not.
Yeah, so in the 2 and R, you can still go for those DH without having to even address this like theory argument. It doesn't really address the theory argument.
It does not relate to the question of whether or not you kick the counterplan. Now, separately, I think you're asking something else, which is, do I have to answer those theory arguments? And yes, you probably do. I mean, a smart app is going to make you keep answering whether or not the counterplan was conditional or not, at least to the 1AR in most cases. To suck up your time. In fact, we always went for things like condo bad. We are more likely to go for condo bad if you kick the counterplan than if you went for it. For a bunch of obvious reasons. So strategically, it always makes more sense because you want that to go away, and now we're going to make you keep talking about it.
At least through the 1AR, because the 2NR is the hardest speech debate, and if you have to invest a minute to a minute and a half answering conditionality bad, it's near impossible.
And 2AR, don't go for it, just go for your case.
Well, I wouldn't say don't go for it unequivocally. You could go for it if you want to go for conditionality bad, if you think you're winning it or something, or you need to go for it, like you're losing everything else. But in the 2AR, you don't have to. The same as the negative doesn't have to go for T, they can just not go for it. Similarly, the 2AR can just not go for conditionality and get all that time back.
Have you ever heard an instance where the negative has forced the app? Is there an argument you can think of where the negative forces the app to go for conditionality bad?
I don't think it's an argument necessarily. If you're just like getting outgunned in a debate.
Strategically going for it's one thing, but it's not like T where I could impact her and like force you to go.
No, the negative cannot force you to go for conditionality. And there's some instances when strategically it's the best option because you're losing everything else. But
I want to talk about presumption then real quick and how this operates. What's the idea of presumption in debate? And what's sort of the origin of that idea? Come on.
I think we talked about this in my lab. Does anyone remember this?
Yeah. There's only 2 of you that talk. So it's Pepsi or Blue Man Group. What do you got? Which one?
Well, I may be like totally off base here, but like maybe like we presume that like each side has like a fair chance to win. I don't know if that's like.
That's not it.
Yeah.
You present an argument, and if not disputed, you have to go with the argument because it was never disputed.
That's the burden of
Oh,
rejoinder.
that's rejoinder, yeah.
Is it like when the app loses all its advantages and the neg loses its disadvantages, you just presume neg? Because
Yeah.
the app hasn't proven
Yeah, that was a roundabout way of saying it.
Yeah. Why do you presume neg?
Because the app hasn't proved anything that their plan is better than the school.
There's a prima facie burden of the affirmative to prove that there is something wrong with the status quo. And the status quo is innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, we presume that change from the status quo is bad because of the baggage that comes with change, spending,
Yeah, whatever it is.
it's uncertain.
You have to prove that there's something wrong with the status quo before you overcome the judges, and before there's inertia for the judge to change in the present system. Kuma, what were you going to ask?
I was just gonna say that like isn't presumption like you don't have, it's like the judge does the judge automatically like errs towards the policy that has the least amount of risk for an impact.
Yes. That's kind of it. Innocent until proven guilty is the idea of presumption, even in debate.
Innocent until guilty.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, proven guilty. Well, in debate, it isn't really about proving it's guilty.
Yeah.
It's about direction towards that. So hang on a second. In a world where I've run a counterplan, how does that affect presumption? I'm going for a counterplan. How does that affect presumption? Because I should have added this. This is the status quo is innocent until proven guilty. Now what happens if I'm going for a counterplan? Yeah.
Well, the app is now kind of guilty because there's usually some problem, or hold on, no.
Oh, you're so close. You were so close. Yeah, Blue Man Group.
Is the app or the neg going for the
Neg's going for a counterplan.
Then,
The app's
then
going
you're
for
defending the status quo. Well,
No.
no.
You're not defending the status quo.
You're
It's
saying,
complicated.
you're saying there's another way besides the app to solve for it.
Yeah, so
Q and R goes for the state's counterplan, and they go for it. And the app goes for the app. How does that change presumption? Because since you're not, the status quo is proven, right?
okay.
Both teams agree that the status quo is messed up. What happens? Sure.
Now, like, it's not just like, it's the status quo comes out of the picture and the counterplan replaces it, kind of?
Well, let me back up just one step real quick. In a world where it's status quo versus plan, and there's a tie. I cannot resolve it. It's a tie. It's a dead heat. Nose to nose, right? Who wins?
Vote neg because it's the staff's job to prove they're better, and since they fail to meet that burden, we should vote neg on presumption.
Boosh. Correct answer. Now, I'm going for a counterplan. It's counterplan versus AF, and it's a tie. Who wins that debate? This will answer the question of presumption. Go for it.
In that case, you vote out because it's the neg's job to prove the CP is better.
To prove the AF is bad, and they haven't done it. It's a tie. So presumption flips in that world, which helps you when you're debating, because as you start to weigh the risk of the counterplan solving the case and the risk of the net benefit, the closer you can get that to zero, to tie, the chances are that you're going to win. So this is an argument you have to make. This is not every judge's neutral position.
Yeah.
It's not mine, for example. You have to argue that presumption flips. Because I'm always wondering, because for some judges like me, I'm always thinking the counterplan, if it lacks a net benefit, is inherently conditional and therefore goes away. But all counterplans are conditional. So,
I think two judge conditions,
oh, go ahead.
All right. That's another thing about presumption. The 2NR goes for a counterplan and a disad in case, maybe, right? Because they think the counterplan might not solve. Now, let's say the AF wins that the counterplan is worse than the status quo. Under the logic of conditionality, then, would the judge not just remove the counterplan from the debate and revert back to the disad versus the case? Well,
I missed what he said.
is it judge intervention?
This is the debate we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I think for our purposes of making this clear, we're going to take opposite sides of this one. Sounds like you're going to say yes, or no, yes, or I'll take whichever side you go.
I disagree with it, but
Okay, never mind, then we agree.
there are a lot of judges who presume that if the counterplan is worse than the status quo, the argument the negative makes on conditionality for a real world, right, is that if you have like you said something and the other person proves that it's really a bad idea, then you just don't talk about that idea anymore. It's bad, so we'll drop it. Same with conditionality. If the AF wins that the counterplan is a bad idea, the judge, as a decision maker, should not evaluate that idea. So people make arguments like the judge can kick the counterplan after the debate if we lose it, and then we just have to win the plan versus the disad, right? Or the disad versus the plan.
If you're negative in making this argument, the safest, I think, and most logical way to approach this is that that is an element of weighing that you have to do.
Yeah. It's not just like no risk for the negative, right? It's a bunch of the 2NR's time goes into impact calculus, right? So you then need to add another layer of impact calculus that would be even if we don't win the counterplan, disad still outweighs case independently, right? Which is more time that you have to put into doing things also going for the counterplan. Right? Which is an answer to this presumption flips argument. That presumption does not flip, they have just disproven. We have proven we thought that there's this counter example that could be better, they've proven it wrong, they still have to prove their AF is better than the status quo.
They always have to win that. Yeah.
This kind of jog my memory, reminded me of what I always said was the role of the ballot. I don't know if that has any relevance to theory or if that's just a
I think that we tend to think of role of the ballot in terms of how it relates to the K, but to me the question of role of the ballot is really just another weighing question of what you want the judge to do in the debate. So the role of the ballot could be to determine whether or not conditionality was better or worse for the debate, because the role of the ballot is for me to decide what to do with it after you all have debated.
And we're kind of having a role of the ballot question debate right now. Is the role of the judge to decide whether the AF was better than the counterplan, or was the role of the judge to decide whether the AF was proven that they should win the debate? right? If the role of the ballot is the AF has to prove that their AF is better than the status quo, the negative then should be able to read counterplans to disprove that, to prove that the AF is in fact not better than the status quo, that there's another thing that could happen. The AF is not a good idea, right? Then the judge could just logically, if the counterplan's bad, not go for that. The AF still would then have to answer the dissent. But
Yeah,
What is the difference between role of the ballot and framework? Is there any clear difference between them?
framework is a way of determining what the role of the ballot should be. Like, it's a subset. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the argument that we have about what the role of the ballot is.
role of the ballot, I think, can apply more generically to a bunch of different things, how you want the judge to evaluate the debate. But framework is used very specifically in one instance to say you want the judge to either evaluate RK before the AF or evaluate the discursive implications of the reading of the 1AC first, right? The word framework is used very specifically in debate as, but they both are framing mechanisms.
For example, we could be trying to decide at the end of the debate whether topicality outweighed theory. And there's probably reasons why it could or could not. Right here in the front, you've got something that you want to say, I can tell. Yeah. No, not really. I cannot tell them. It seems to me that you wanted to. All right, it's 7:56. We've been doing this for about an hour. Why don't we take a 10-minute break real quick, go get some water, walk around, go to the bathroom, we'll come back and start talking about dispositionality and some other stuff.
I don't know the point of view.